This tutorial is about understanding your keys to your kingdom that are your user IDs and passwords. Let's get started with some background. Many websites and almost all email servers protect you by wanting to know that the person they are dealing with is you and that you can be identified with near certainty. You do this by telling the system who you are and then proving it. Your user ID says who you are, and when you enter your password, you're proving it by using something that is a secret from everyone else and only known to you and that system. The user ID you pick for a site or email system uniquely identifies you at that site. If the user ID you chose wasn't unique, the system would let you know that the user ID you picked was already in use and you'd have to pick a different one. While your user ID would be unique, your password could be anything, and it could even be the same one many others have chosen. For instance, many people use ABC123 as their password, so that's one we recommend you don't use. Because a personal email address is unique and is linked to one individual, many websites like you to use it as your user ID at registration time. The registration process will check to see if someone has already registered with it. If not, you may then be asked to set up your password. If that ID is already in use, you'll be asked to set up a different one. In some cases, you may have already registered and don't remember your password, so you'll need to have it reset. When you're setting up your user ID and password, you may be given the opportunity to specify additional information to make it possible to identify you in other ways besides your password. This is done so your password can be reset in the event that you forget what it is. You may be asked to name your first pet, the high school you graduated from, your mother's maiden name, your father's middle name, etc. These are some of the more common questions that you provide answers to in place of your password. The information you enter as answers when setting up your account does not need to be accurate. Instead of naming your high school, you might name your middle school as an example. You might use your friend's middle name instead of your father's. In fact, it's better if you answer those questions inaccurately. That helps to keep someone that knows you very well or has collected enough information about you from answering those questions correctly and gaining access to accounts you may not want them to have. You'll just need to remember the values you used instead of the real ones. For additional security when setting up your email address as your user ID, some sites will send you an email containing directions and some kind of code to verify that you are at that email address. Correctly following the directions and using the code the email contained means that the email address is valid and that you have the password to the email account. You may need to respond to the email within a certain amount of time or it expires. They may also allow you to choose a picture that will be displayed on the login page, so when you see it, you know you're on the real site and not giving your security to a site that looks like the real one but is the work of thieves. You might be wondering if you need to have different user IDs and/or passwords for every site. The answer is that it's up to you. To be as secure as possible, you would have a separate user ID and password for every site. Of course, the more of them you have, the more likely you'll forget the less used ones. Conversely, the fewer you have, the less secure you would be, but remembering just a few should be pretty easy, and so your email address generally serves as a good single user ID. That leaves all your security up to the password. One way to come up with a password is to use a passphrase or a nonsensical word. A passphrase could be a lyric from a song or a favorite quote. An example of a strong passphrase is "Superman is super strong." A nonsensical word can be built using the first letter from each word in a phrase, such as C $200 WPG, period. Represents collect $200 when passing go. These typically have additional benefits, such as being longer and easier to remember. I wouldn't recommend that you use the one mentioned here. Here are some of the things you shouldn't use because these patterns of passwords are obvious to even the casual code breaker. First, it shouldn't spell a word or series of words that can be found in a standard dictionary, especially the word password. Second, it shouldn't spell a word with a number added to the beginning and/or the end. Third, it shouldn't be based on any personal information such as user ID, family name, pet, birthday, etc., since that information is easy to find out. Fourth, it shouldn't be based on a keyboard pattern, example QWERTY, or duplicate characters such as AA, BB, CC, DD. Passwords should not be shared with anyone. In situations where someone requires access to another individual's protected resources, delegation of permission options should be explored. For example, Google Calendar allows users to delegate control of their calendar to another user without sharing any passwords. You should change your passwords periodically. The frequency of password changes is generally based on what they protect. For example, you might consider changing the password to your banking account more frequently than the one you use to read an online newspaper. As a general rule, you should avoid writing down your password. In cases where it is necessary to write it down, that password should be stored in a secure location, for instance in your wallet or in a locked file, and properly destroyed when no longer needed. Consider writing down hints, not the actual password. Never store your passwords in a file on your device unless that file is password protected. Using a password manager to store your IDs and passwords is not recommended unless the password manager uses strong encryption and requires authentication prior to use. The password manager included with Firefox is an example of a password manager for Windows, Mac, and Android, and any other platform Firefox will run on that uses strong encryption. You will need to set it up on each device you use, but you can use the same master password if you pick one, such as one based on the rules we mentioned before. Some devices also include a fingerprint reader that serves as a password manager too. Just remember that your passwords are as safe as the weakest link. When you change an account password, you should avoid reusing a previous password. If an account was previously compromised, either knowingly or unknowingly, reusing a password could allow that user account to once again become compromised. Similarly, if a password was shared, reusing that password could allow someone unauthorized access to your account. Avoid using the same password for multiple accounts. Even though it makes it easier to remember your passwords, it can also have a chain effect, allowing an unauthorized person to gain unauthorized access to multiple accounts. This is particularly important when dealing with more sensitive accounts, such as your online banking accounts, shopping sites, and anywhere you use a credit card. These passwords should differ from the password you use for online newspapers and other web-based accounts. Do not use automatic logon functionality, since it negates much of the value of using a password. If a malicious user is able to gain physical access to a device that has automatic logon configured, they will be able to access all your information. The one exception to that would be the use of a password manager such as the one included in Firefox. When you're done using your device, quit any running apps and completely log off or otherwise secure your device from unauthorized use. For example, use a screen lock or a screensaver. Be aware of phishing tricks. Never provide your password over email or based on an email request. Codebreakers try to trick people into giving away their passwords and other personal information by sending fake emails that appear to come from common websites such as eBay, PayPal, or a bank. They may also use the telephone. These techniques are often referred to under the term social engineering. So despite everyone's best efforts to keep everything secure, we know it doesn't always work. To further reduce fraud, some online vendors require that an order from their website be shipped to the same address as the billing address on the credit card. Now suppose a codebreaker gets into a system you do business with. Ideally, everything on their system would be encrypted in pieces, each with different security schemes and passwords to go with them, but that isn't the real world. Most data is stored with minimal security, with the exception of your passwords. For them, what's known as a one-way encryption scheme might be used so your password is never stored in plain text on their computers. That's how companies can say that no passwords were stolen. That isn't the same as saying the information about you wasn't stolen. Because the business doesn't know who may have broken in and whether or not the encrypted passwords were stolen, and what kind of code-breaking skills they have, customers are often asked to change their passwords as a precaution. All too often, passwords are stolen directly from a person's device by viruses. Viruses are programs or apps that infect your system via many possible paths. An email could contain one. Websites may scour your device for information left in your browser. A virus could be part of an app you loaded on the device. New viruses are developed every day because of the profit they generate as the result of theft. We have another tutorial that discusses viruses and malware in more detail, so we won't talk about it anymore here. If someone unauthorized gets your user ID and password, they can become you wherever it's used. You would become the victim of identity theft. Again, if you use a unique combination for every different place, you limit your exposure as opposed to using a single combination everywhere. Because identity theft is so difficult to get resolved, insurance companies and other institutions offer insurance coverage to help you with the financial burden associated with it. Now we'll talk about where user IDs and/or passwords can be used to control access to your smart device. It usually offers the owner the option of requiring a password to turn the device on. This is very secure, but recovering a lost password here is very difficult, if not impossible, so this is one to be used with great care. If you forget this password, you will likely end up with a device that is useless and would need to be repaired. The device owner also may have the option of requiring a password before access will be granted to the basic system once the device has been powered on. It's marginally easier to recover from a lost password at this level, but recovery will often lead to complete loss of all the data the device contains. Have a backup ready to restore. Often, devices will let you set passwords or touchscreen patterns that can be drawn on the screen to provide secure access to a device. It usually has an optional screen timeout set, so if it's left unattended for that period of time, it automatically locks and you would need to re-enter the password information to get back in. Some websites allow you to sign in using the credentials of another site, such as Facebook, for example. While it really simplifies things, it's really a bad idea when it comes to your privacy and security, since you are giving the new site you're signing into access to your entire Facebook account. That includes the list of your friends, the things you liked and disliked, and any other information Facebook contains about you. The answers to all the secondary questions they ask you about your pet and middle names, etc., when you're creating your password, are all there for the asking. You're not only giving up your own privacy, but that of everyone connected to you. Maintaining your privacy helps guard not only your identity from theft, but that of others too. Be vigilant. Check your credit card statements for charges you didn't authorize or make yourself. Check all your accounts for any irregularities. Even if you didn't set up online access to your accounts, it's a possibility that someone else did all that for you and they are actively using it. We've saved a basic precaution for last. Make sure no one is observing you as you enter your security information. That includes security cameras. A backspace here and there as you enter your password may confuse a viewer enough to thwart their efforts. If you ever suspect someone may have compromised your security, be sure to change your password as soon as possible. We don't want you to be overly paranoid, but we hope we've convinced you that privacy and security go hand in hand to protect your identity and that of others. And finally, thank you for watching, and we hope you're better off for having watched this. Please let us know what you thought of this and how you think we can improve it. We welcome your comments.